let's go to Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
We can open up for anything now? Sure. Okay. Ryan, against Michigan, I understand you guys wanted to establish the run. I mean, the stat, the team that's won the rushing battle the last 20 years wins the game. When that wasn't working, though, there seemed to be a lack of adjustments. Is that fair? And what did you see when you watched the film?
Yeah, I think the first thing is just overall, let me just quickly start with the defense. I feel like the defense played excellent. I thought that, really from the Oregon game on, some of those adjustments that were made have been excellent, and I thought they played really, really hard in this game. Was everything perfect? No, but I thought they played really good. I think when you look at the offensive side of the ball, it was not a good day. It wasn't a good day across the board on offense. And, some of that had to do with the coaching and some of the game planning that went on. There's no question that, we could have done a better job getting the ball to the perimeter. I think one of the key points of the game, though, is when you have 5 trips to the red zone and you only get 10 points. And, in those moments there, we had a couple missed field goals, we had an interception, we had the field goal, and we had the touchdown. And, we hadn't done that up to that point, and that was a big deal. So, and then on special teams, we had some other things that, we didn't execute very well. A couple, kicks that weren't fielded great down on the 7-yard line, which created coming out situations, and then we had the 2 missed field goals. So ultimately, that comes back on me as the head coach. Whether it's, the right guys being in the right spot, the recruiting part of it, the scheme, the coaching. So, that's on me. But I think when you look back on it, there's definitely ways that we could have got the ball to the perimeter. I think when you look at, I think we threw it 35 times in the game, which is, I think, Will's second most throws. But, it certainly played into it being in the red zone and coming out. But there was definitely ways that we could have done a better job because it's the coach's job to put the guys in the best position to be successful. And that didn't always happen on Saturday.
Real quick, rallying the troops now. You did it 2 years ago. I know you guys fell short against Georgia, but you really outplayed them for most of that game. How do you rally the troops this year?
Well, we got a lot in front of us, and as much as this hurts, we got a chance to go play for a national championship. And when the dust settles, here we are, and we don't just turn around after a day and say, we're on to the next thing. That's not going to happen. But we've come in here, had some meetings. We're going to get out in the field today, move around a little bit, and so it's almost like the NFL. You think about the teams who are in the wild card, get that first win, and they can get some momentum going and win the whole thing. So that's all out in front of us, and we have plenty good enough players to go do that. So it's going to come down to the leaders pulling everybody together, knowing that we got some guys maybe going into the portal. We got a couple of things, but all those things are going to happen whether we lost or we won. So here we are, 10-2, frustrated with how the season ended, but everything's out in front of us. And so we've had good conversations. I think the guys are moving in that direction. I know we want to know what the next target is, and we'll get that Sunday. But it's a good chance we're going to be hosting here, and so I think that's exciting for our guys. And I know that we'll rally around this thing and go after it.
Jeremy Birmingham, podcast.
Ryan, last one about recruiting before we get going in here.
It's a bonus.
You talk about adjusting to the changing NIL landscape, the money getting bigger and bigger every single time there's a conversation. How are you guys specifically adapting, but also how does the executive order that Mike DeWine signed in Ohio allowing the school to be more engaged and directly paying players assist you guys in this kind of wild, wild west, which is crazy that it's still a wild, wild west after 3 years of this?
Right. First off, for Governor DeWine to sign that is big for our university, big for the program, because it allows us more flexibility in how we do things. Won't get into the details of all that, but really, really important. And him doing that, again, allows us to do a lot more things. And I know we're all looking to try to figure out the revenue share and how that fits into the university. And so there's still a lot of questions to be answered on that. And so a lot of it is you're figuring out as you go. But we know that number continues to rise, so we have to continue to be aggressive in that area. And what was the number last year is going to only increase next year. So the more things like that just happen that can be done certainly gives us, again, a better opportunity.
Who has to be engaged and involved in national conversations to put a cap or a guideline or a limit on this?
Yeah, it's going to be at the conference level right now. And I give Tony a bunch of credit for being aggressive with this and communicating with Commissioner Sankey. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation about, these types of things to make sure that there's alignment between the Big Ten and the SEC. And that's really where it's going to start. And I know that they have been in a lot of, talks about, multiple different ways to start addressing some of these things to put more guardrails around it.
Adam King, WBNS.
Getting back to the game, I know you're not going to give us the insight of exactly on the headset, but what is that discussion like between you and Chip there in the fourth quarter with every play call, debating if you should run, stick to the run, or return to the pass?
Yeah, usually it's between each series. You get the script of what comes, for the next drive. Some thoughts that are going on, and some of them are mixed with RPOs, and some of them are just call it and run it. Mixture of all those things. But when you do call an RPO, sometimes if they're in a too high shell, that ball is going to get handed off, and then obviously you just have passes. And so you go through it, you go through the list and see what you're thinking. And there were a couple of them that we got the turnover there in the red zone and weren't able to turn that. I mean, that was very, very frustrating. And that was a big part of the game right there. So, but that's typically how it goes.
When you look at kicking, where do you go from here? How confident are you in fielding, and how do you build that confidence knowing what's going forward?
Well, we wouldn't have put him in the game if we didn't feel confident in him. And, I know his teammates have told him the same thing. Everyone's got a job to do, and that's the game. And I have my job. Everyone has their own job. And so you got to do your job. And so, we'll continue to look at how he does in practice, but we wouldn't have put him in the game if we did not believe in him.
Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Ryan, in the 2 minute when you guys were taking timeouts and trying to get the ball back, as you reevaluate that situation, do you think that you guys handled that properly with your timeouts and using the 2 minute warning to your advantage, or is that something that you guys have to go back through and reevaluate?
Well, I think if you wait to the 2 minute warning, with 3 timeouts left and you still need a touchdown, that's plenty enough time to go down the field. And so, we try to do the best we can to get with, what's on the chart in terms of the analytics to get the feedback on what that should be. I think we had plenty of time to go score. We didn't do that. That wasn't the issue. But we'll always look at it to see where we are on the field, what's the down and distance, and then go from there. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is, get the ball back with as many timeouts as possible and as much time on the clock as possible.
And then the 12 minute, I know that you guys said that it was just a communication, but have there been conversations about that in particular and what exactly went wrong there out of the timeout?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into all of it, but yeah, there was a miscommunication from up top, and once it got sent in, it was hard to it got loud and it got hard to get back off the field, and so it was a miscommunication. It shouldn't have happened.
Stefan Kreisnick, Cleveland.com.
You look at the rankings yesterday and kind of how the bracket sets up, and like you said, it seems like you guys are going to get a home game after the way, not just the loss, but the post-game situation, everything. Is there a sense with the seniors of excitement to get another chance to kind of, I guess, avenge the way things ended at home last week?
I think there's a mix of emotions there, but I do think as we get closer to finding out who we're playing, there'll be more and more excitement around that. But I think to know that their season isn't over and that the last time they played with each other isn't over and that they still can achieve the goal of winning a national championship certainly is right there. And they are. I think with every day they're getting more and more excited about that. But again, you don't just wake up and say, okay, on to the next thing. It just doesn't work that way. But we're getting there, and that's why we're getting on the field today to get moving around and make sure everybody's together on this thing. And then that you got to get that first win. In the playoffs, you got to get that first one, and then you just continue to build from there and grow. But I know the seniors are going to do a good job leading here the next couple of weeks.
Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Going back to the game plan. So going into it, the game plan, you thought that even with a makeshift offensive line, that you would be able to attack them in the middle, even though it's the strength of their defense. Are you saying that was the game plan going in, that you felt comfortable with that?
No. I mean, I think that there was definitely times where we did that, and that didn't turn out very well. But there's also other times we tried some other things as well. And I do think being in the red zone, coming out, certainly played into that, and some of those were part of RPOs. But there's no question that, the ball was run interiorly too much in the game. I think that's clear to see. Again, we did throw it, I think, 35 times, and, there were some plays to the outside. But yeah, overall, just too, the percentage was too high of running the ball inside. It's clear.
Did you find yourself involved in the play calling more so than you had at any point previous this year? Did you ever get involved in that at all? Or?
I try to give my feedback and try to get involved the much I can on both sides. I click over on defense, I click over on offense, and try to do everything I can to help, to be a part of it. But yeah, ultimately, listen, I'm responsible. I'm the head coach, so that's where the buck stops.
Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
And there's some speculation that after the first pick and then after he went to the 10th, that you guys weren't comfortable maybe throwing the ball as much. Is there anything to that you thought, well, we need to run a little more here because Will took that shot, or is that just not accurate at all?
We go off of what the doctors say, and the doctors, felt like he was okay to go back into the game. And so in that moment, we have to trust that he is okay to do that. And I think a little bit too was the interception coming out a little bit, and I think you then are in a similar situation down there on the 5-yard line on 3rd and long. We didn't execute the run, but defense is playing good. Added the punt, get it out of there, see if the defense can get a stop. But no, at the end of the day, we're going to just listen to the doctors and got to go off their advice.
So it didn't really impact from a coaching standpoint of how what it's going to look like, the play calling. He was fine as far as you're concerned.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, and then tempo, it really worked at the end of the half, and then it just kind of went away. Obviously, if you have to do it over again, maybe you go tempo. Why didn't you go back to it? What was the thinking of going to it?
Yep. We had tempo plays going into the game. I thought early on, we kind of had a little bit of a pace to us, got into the red zone again and bogged down. At the end of the half, we were in a 2-minute drill because it was more of a 2-minute situation than it was just tempo. Looking back again, I don't think there's any way you could argue that tempo would have helped us more in the game.
Bill Landis, Kings of the North.
Talk about having to win the rushing battle in this game and historically what that's meant. Does it at any point become, a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, that's what Michigan built its team to do. Meanwhile, you guys are as talented and more talented than anyone in the country at the receiver position, yet it seems like you go into this game with the mindset of, we're going to run the ball anyway. I don't know if that's to prove a point or what, but how much is that on your mind, and at this point, is it on your mind to your detriment as you try to put together a good game plan against Michigan?
Well, I think there's two things there. I think we certainly threw the ball more than we passed it. Threw the ball more than we ran it, but I don't think that's your question. I think the question is, what we got to do what's best to win the game. Yeah. And that's got to be the number one goal, I think there's certain things that you have to do, and we have a list of like 10 situations. The rushing yards is one of them, turnovers is one of them, X plays is one of them. You go through it. So you don't just get stuck on one thing. But when you see something that's like undefeated over 17 years, you got to make sure the guys understand that. That's important. But it doesn't necessarily mean like you got to do whatever you can to win the game. That's the bottom line. And so, there's other ways to run the ball. You can get the ball on the perimeter. You can, do different things, as you guys know. So, sometimes when you get down in there inside the red zone, it gets tight in there. You have to, be creative. And I think we could have been more creative in those areas.
You guys now are on year 4 of at least not reaching 2 of those stated goals. Obviously, the third one is still out in front of you. Why are you the right coach to get the team to that point this season?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I can't sit here and tell you that, as I look back on the 4 years, if there's like one thing in common, you look at each game and you can identify different things that didn't go well. And ultimately the result's the result, And so our guys, first off, love Ohio State. They are completely bought in. I thought they played extremely hard in that game, and I thought they wanted to win that game more than anything else. And so I think the culture is as strong as it's ever been. I think we have great players. I think we have great coaches. It was a bad day. And so now we have to go forward. And we got to, and the mindset is go win the whole thing now. And that's it. Like, we can't go back and start, second guessing things at this point. Certainly you can imagine how that's happened here in the last, few days. But, we have to move forward. We have to focus on that. And, again, when you look at our type of guys, you look at the program, you look at, the way our guys compete, you look at, the way our guys develop, you look at, we won a lot of games. We're 10-2. Now, I know we didn't win this one in some key games, and that hurts. So we got to keep learning from it and growing from it and building on it. Every time you go through some of this, you learn more and more, and that has to be the case here.
Far left, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Huddle.
Ryan, with the game, how do you go about not minimizing it with the playoffs, but there's this thing of the game, then there's also the season that's still going on. Is there too much put on the game? Is there not enough? Is there not enough on the rest of the season? Like, where's your mindset in all of that?
I mean, I think about all of that a lot, yeah, because we all know what this game means, and again, when you come up short in the game, it's devastating. But we still got a great opportunity in front of us. So I think we've had some good meetings. We've talked about it. We've kind of come to some common ground in certain areas, and so again, we're getting back on the field today, getting moving forward, and you got to look at it, like the NFL playoffs, and that's what we're going to do. So, as bad as this feels, we have an opportunity to go here and go win a championship in 4 games. So, we can use that frustration and anger and things that have come with this loss to catapult us into these playoffs, to motivate us, and that's what we have to do, because at this point, you only can control what you can control. So that's kind of where our focus will be.
And then I guess you just had wrapped up signing day. Do you expect to be here next year?
Yes.
Steve Hellwagen, 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, Coach, along the lines of Bill's question, I mean, 4 straight years, the result, I mean, the games have looked different, but the result's been the same. Just, you're still in the middle of this season. I understand that completely, but as you get into the offseason and think about your approach and how you're going to go about your business, at some point, is there going to be an emphasis on, is this as simple as spending more money on the offensive line, finding the guys that you need to win in the Big Ten in November? Just what kind of things will you address, I guess, in the offseason so that, as you said before the game, this never happens again?
Well, I felt like, we did some of that this offseason, when we, upgraded in some certain areas, and, and some of that was in the offensive line. But there's no question that, we have to win in there, in that game and in a lot of games. So, yeah, I mean, there's no question at the end of the season, you go through and you try to identify the areas that you got to get upgraded, you got to get fixed to go reach your goals. And so that'll get done again this year.
Dan Holt, Lebanon Warriors.
Ryan, just going back to, the goal stuff and the seniors, I mean, this is a senior class. You brought them in 2021. It was the highest rated class in history. They haven't achieved any of those 3 goals yet. Does that, make you feel a sense of pressure that you got to go accomplish something in this college ball playoffs so that this class leaves here or something?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's it. And then these guys, again, we've said it all year. They came back for a reason. So yeah, when you lose this game, it is completely maddening and just frustrating and all the above. And so yeah, again, the good news is we still have a goal out in front of us. We still got a chance to go do something special here with this group. But the adjustments have to be made. In order to do that, we got to get the things fixed that didn't go well in that game. And, got to get that first win and then get some momentum from there, because, that's all we can do at this point. But yeah, to sit here and say that we're not frustrated or disappointed would not be true.
It seems like you guys were playing with a ton of confidence, very freely against Indiana, and that just didn't carry over to Michigan. Why don't you think it carried over, and how do you get that back?
I think we came into the game as confident and as loose, I think, as we've been since I've been here, probably going back to 19. So, I think as the game went on, it started to get a little bit tighter because, it was, a couple turnovers here and there, some things didn't go our way. And so, you start to feel that a little bit as the game went on. I don't think we started out the game that way. I don't. And I thought that preparation was loose coming into the game. But obviously it didn't end that way.
I guess then what do you have to do then so that if you get into playoffs, you end up in a similar situation where things start poorly?
Yeah.
How do you keep the team from losing its confidence like it did in that game?
Yeah, well, you got to continue to find ways to jumpstart the team and get some excitement, and execution fuels emotion, and a big part of that is coaching. Trying to find ways to jumpstart the team and give them some X plays or things on the perimeter that can kind of get us going a little bit, and then when you start, moving things around and getting the ball outside, it opens up a little bit inside. Now, we're not all of a sudden we can't just abandon the run. We're just not going to be throwing it, 60 times a game. That's just not a recipe for success. But it's clear that we have, very, very good receivers here, and when we have an advantage there, we got to utilize that. And so we have to figure out what those adjustments are going into this next game and make sure that gets done.
Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Can you overthink the Michigan game? And do you feel like you guys have started to overthink the Michigan game as this losing streak has continued?
I think you can look at it a million different ways, which you can imagine we have too. But at the end of the day, you got to put your players in a situation to be successful, and then we got to execute them. We do. We have to take care of the ball, but we also have to be aggressive. It comes down to both of those things. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. We can't sit there and crawl up into a shell, but at the same time, we can't be reckless with the ball either. And that's what it comes down to. And I think when you have success early on, it can build some positive momentum. And when you don't, then things can get a little bit uptight. And that's kind of what happened. But execution fuels emotion. And again, it goes back to the coach has got to put us in a situation to be successful, and then the guy's got to go execute it and do it.
And there's maybe this idea out there that there's the idea of like maybe you not being here because it's somebody else's decision, but also that idea of you not being here because of your own decision. Have you at any point in the last couple of years even come close to having that thought?
No, this is a wonderful place, and I got a great job, one of the best jobs in America, and it's a challenge at times, and I'm disappointed about this more than anybody. It crushes me, but we're going to continue to move and figure out what it is and overcome this obstacle. And we got a great way to make this a little bit better by going to win the whole thing this year. And then we figure out what it is and get it fixed moving forward. That's it. And it's my job to make sure I'm focused on this team right now. And obviously, with recruiting, to make sure the pieces are ready moving forward. That's it.
One last thing. Justin Fry's been here 3 years now. I think he's landed 10 guys on the recruiting trail, plus a couple other transfer portal additions. Do you think he has done a good job recruiting and developing his position group?
I think for all of our guys, there's been things that they've done well, and then things that they haven't done well. And so we give them feedback on the areas that they got to improve on. I've shared with him some of my things that I think he's doing well and things he's not doing well, and I won't get into those right now. But there's all areas that we can improve in, and the number one job for any position coach is their unit, their room. Who you're bringing in, who you're developing, and ultimately, are you building enough depth to go win the games we need to win? And so, that's the challenge for all of our guys. Then it's power of the unit, and then it's scheme is really the third thing. So, there's certainly things he's done well, but things he's got to improve on.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, in the last few days since Sunday, people have talked about your future on social media, television. What have been the communications you've had with recruits, guys who signed today, guys in the roster? What has that message to them all been like?
No, they've been great. You can tell by the class there was nobody flinching, and I think a lot of these guys nowadays have found some balance, and not riding the roller coaster and understand what comes with being at Ohio State, and not diving into the extremes of it all. And so, it's a great sign to see these guys that didn't even flinch after this game. I think it motivated them even more to want to come here and win next year.
Has it not been have you had to reassure them hey, I'll be the one coaching you next year or anything like that?
No, it never came up.
Tom Berry, WBNS.
Coach, I really see at the end of the game, would you be in favor of the NCAA or the Big Ten banning flag planting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a touchy subject because of the way the game ended. But I think that's up for Tony and the guys at the Big Ten to decide and figure out what's best. We certainly don't want situations like that going on after the game.
One other thing, with what we're kind of seeing, the professionalism of college football recruiting, how much more time do you spend now on the transfer portal? Because the one phenomenon is it seems that teams are getting older now, taking guys, and it's almost like a free agency system, just to help with depth and everything. How much more do you go to it now?
I think every year is going to be more and more. I think we'll kind of see how this year shakes out with the retention, but ultimately you got to fill your roster. And when you look at the value in the NFL of a rookie as opposed to somebody who's getting into their second contract, they're different. And I think that there is a value to bringing in a freshman as they get into your program. You know, they're into your program. You know, they're a Buckeye. So there's a premium on that. But the value of a freshman coming in and playing is not the same as a third or fourth year guy, someone who's in their 20s, who's more mature. So those are all things that Mark Pantoni really, you know, and I have had conversations about, because you have to start kind of putting values on guys and figuring that out like the NFL. And so that's what we got to do. And so I think more and more the portal will become part of the conversation just because of the way this is set up, you know, and the fact that it's opening up next week during this whole process is a whole nother set of challenges that we got to work through this year, but also moving forward just in terms of the rules of it all, because you're gonna see some teams really affected by this.
Allowed to have so many players, does that,
Yeah,
as far as the actual recruiting the younger kids, does that change everything?
it does. Yeah, it changes, and we don't know exactly what it's going to be in terms of a roster limit now. You know, we've heard certain numbers that we're working towards and projecting on. So, you know, that's the way we're making our decisions.
Austin Ward, podcast.
Ron, you have always said ultimately you're responsible. You've never hidden from that part of it, and you've said that the last few days have been full of second guessing. When you were thinking about that, is there any part of you that has lost confidence or self-belief that you are the right guy for this job?
Yeah, no. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and if I was in your seat, I'd be asking the same question. But no, not at all. You know, I go through every single thing that we do, and but there are things that you learn from, and just things that are absolutely maddening and frustrating. And you know, I was in shock after the game. I really was. I never expected that to happen. And there were some things that happened in the game that you know I'm responsible for that can never happen again. I don't know how else to say it. And then other things that it's still a game of football. And certain things that are going to happen in the game affect the outcome. That's just how it goes. As much as we all want to win the game, we still got to play the game, and that's really what it comes down to. I know it sounds simple, but that's it. And again, we got great guys. We have great football minds. We have great talent. So again, nobody's more frustrated than me, but I know we're going to get this right.
Bill asked you about this earlier with just getting ready for the playoff and you leading the Buckeyes into that. For any segment of the fan base or anyone who thinks they're out on Ryan Day, I know culture, a day like today and the signing class are all wrapped up into this. What would be your sales pitch to them?
Yeah, I don't think I need to have a sales pitch, but I can say that, I feel their frustration. I don't know what else to tell you. There's no way to defend losing 4 years in a row, but I know this, we're going to play really hard in this game. We're going to swing as hard as we possibly can. And, we got a great group of guys. And so, this is going to move on to, this next challenge, and we got to go attack it with everything that we possibly have. And, and that's about it. I get the frustration. I know what comes with this job, but we also, we've won a lot of games around here too. We've lost some key ones, I know, but we're right there, and we got to keep swinging at it. We got to keep cracking it. And sometimes when, you're really, really close and you feel frustrated, you just got to push through, and that's what we're going to do.
Tim May, let him in a row.
Yeah, Ryan, following up on that, a lot of people in the out, not a lot of people, I've gotten a lot of calls, but you have to play so many roles right now. You understand what I'm saying? And a lot of people want to know, what is that fire? Can you describe the fire in your belly that makes you worthy of being the Ohio State head coach? I'm not questioning, I'm just asking, because a lot of people, because you're so cordial to us, despite repeated questions about different things and stuff, but can you describe the fire in your belly that could erupt the next 4 weeks?
Well, I think it starts with our guys, and when you talk about the motivation of anybody, it starts with the players, and that motivates all of our staff. I know it motivates me every single day to come in here and do everything we possibly can so those guys can achieve their goals. That's why you wake up in the morning. You talk about fire, that's it. I think the next thing is for the fan base and for Buckeye Nation who cares so much about Ohio State. So. When you don't succeed, boy, it just completely crushes you, And so, and then there's just the competitiveness as a person to want to go win, and all of those things motivate us and motivate me. And so, that's what gets you up in the morning and drives you every day, and again, it's hard to say right now coming off of this loss, but you talk about these guys and how hard they go and how hard we go 365 days out of the year. I mean, there's nobody that goes harder than we do and puts in the work we do. So again, I don't have an answer in terms of exactly why, other than there needs to be better decisions made in terms of how we game plan and needs to be better execution in certain areas.
And has nothing to do with that. It has a recruiting question. Can I ask that?
Sure.
Tavian St. Clair committed, seems like almost 5 years ago, but he committed early. Y'all have got a commitment now. I know you can't talk about that. Who's going into, I think, his junior year. What tells you in a sophomore season of a player that he's the quarterback of the future for Ohio State? You understand what I'm saying? What are the telltale signs?
Well, you look at the ability first, and then you look at the competitiveness, the leadership, the size. I mean, you look at a lot of different things, and you try to do the best you can based on, your experience and what you've seen. Knowing that sometimes when they're young, it's a little bit of a risk, and so everybody's a little bit different. You've seen us take guys late. You've seen us take guys early in the process, and you try to make each decision based on what you see.
Yeah, and it's about being in there early. I mean, is that part of the game? Being in there early on a guy? I mean, is that
some guys are recruited early, and some guys are recruited late, and it just depends on who that is. It doesn't necessarily mean the guys who are recruited early end up becoming the best players. Some guys like C.J. Stroud get recruited late, and they become really good players. Everybody's unique, so you got to make sure you look at it that way. There's no cookie cutter way, or we use comps, but that's not necessarily fair either. Everybody's their own person, so you got to try to do and treat everybody individually, as they are.
Thanks, man.
And final questions, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
I'll start with the offensive line. How confident are you that this line, the way it's constituted, is capable of winning a national championship? Are you contemplating changes on the line?
Yeah, we're definitely going to contemplate some rolling at the very least. Look at it over the next couple of weeks. Probably could have done that in the game and considered that in the game. It was a big game. Didn't think that was the right thing to do at the time, but looking back, probably should have at least tried something. And so yeah, we will look into this week on doing some of that.
Josh, do you have a possibility at center, for example, or do you gonna maybe shift guys around, or new starters, or what?
Yeah, all of the above. Josh and Luke, and even considered moving Donovan back inside. We've done a bunch of different things in terms of communication, or in terms of talking in the meeting room. We're not there yet, making a decision. We do have a couple weeks here to take a look at those things and see what gives us the best chance, and maybe it's multiple guys.
Ross came out Sunday and gave you full support. What do you feel is the level of support from the administration, from donors, for you staying as coach?
Well, again, I think everybody's frustrated, and we know it's not acceptable. So I get that part of it, but I think everybody knows that we have to go and attack this thing moving forward. That's what it's going to be. We got an opportunity to go win a national championship, and everybody around here has been very supportive on that, focusing on that, and that's really what it is. And I know what the job is. I know where the focus needs to be, and there hasn't been a ton of communication other than that.
Everyone is saying, and it's probably true, this was the hardest of the 4 losses because Michigan had struggled this year and everything else. Has it felt like that to you? Is this the hardest loss that you've endured here, and how have you gotten through it?
I try not to rank them, but yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. There's no two ways around it.